landscapes. So not necessarily like a big open field, but it's like a small grass area that we use to play volleyball. So the area is relatively pretty flat, and we just chose that area to set up our volleyball courts, and we play like every Sunday. So I guess that's one way we repurpose the landscape.
So you created the whole setup for volleyball?
Yeah, basically.
That's pretty cool. So you create your own infrastructure for that using a landscape in your community. That's really a great example, Abdul. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Carla?
Hello. So I was also going to share a trail um kind of repurposed landscape since I used to live by City Heights right by Manzanita Canyon. So I unfortunately was only there for about 8 months or so, but within that 8 months I did find out that that canyon that we live at is a lot of the native or the locals that have lived there for a while that they use it to go to the other side of the neighborhood. So it's a constant, like, just locals know about it. It's like a half a mile trail. And it was just so wonderful that I didn't know that, canyons in San Diego are definitely connected and connected neighborhoods. So just really quickly, because something that popped up. So I grew up in the Philippines. So growing up in the Philippines, there was a an abandoned lot that was in front of our house. And I specifically remembered that we used that lot for my 7th birthday. We hang piñatas because it was like the only open space that we could have. So I invited all of my friends amongst all of the debris. And it was kind of cool.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Carla. Let's go to you, Paying, and then we'll go to you, Randy. I know you're gonna write probably in the chat, Paying, so we'll go to Randy. Looks like Paying beat you to it, Randy. We'll go to you next. I do not have a grass open field, but my siblings and I would use an elementary school grass area after school to play basketball or softball. Growing up, we also had a basketball hoop in front of our yard, and now that path we use for playing basketball is pretty much dirt and grass and doesn't grow anymore. Awesome. Randy, thank you so much for putting in the chat. I hope you feel better soon. Growing up, my friends and I would have a pickup soccer match in a large parking space under the building we lived in, and lots of my friends in the neighborhood would come over. Cool. Thank you for sharing, Randy. We'll go to you, Jasmine, and then you, Patty.
I'd say I live close to Walnut, so a lot of people use like the dry creek as another pathway to get to like the park or get to their neighborhood, like the houses nearby. So I guess that's another way of repurposing a landscape.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks for sharing. Patty?
When I was younger, we lived in apartments, and I remember there was like the patio area or like the courtyard, and there was just dirt until like I mean I was too young, but I remember my dad had laid out brick, and like the other like people in the building brought out like plants and stuff, so they kind of repurposed that area for like seating. They added chairs and whatnot, so it was like kind of repurposed as a little like gardening center, like a garden uh place with chairs, and people just could sit and hang out.
Awesome. That's cool. It's nice when people can donate their things to like creating a space, and now it's really cool for everyone to enjoy. Let's go to Isaac and then Issy.
Oh, Hello? Hey, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, growing up, we actually had a vacant lot next to our house. So I remember we even cut through the gate to get access to the lot next to us. But we basically used that for everything. I remember me and my brothers even built like a tree house in the tree that was there. We kind of used it for everything. We even buried some of our lost pets there. But yeah,
A little pet cemetery going on, huh?
yeah,
Rest in
unfortunately.
peace to the pets. Is he?
So there's a parking lot outside of my workplace, and we've used it for like markets over the winter and like kind of impromptu DIY art shows. So that's kind of a space that we like to activate every now and then, and it's nice to see it not used as a parking lot.
That's cool. It sounds like y'all generating a little economic opportunity there too. That's super cool. Team Aquarius, I see the Aquariuses are in the building. Aquarius gang Issy. You got some shout outs in the chat. So let's go to Chase and then we'll go to Sergio.
Often when I didn't want to skate in the skate park or it was too crowded, I'd go to the parking lot. I'd get picked up from school and often like use the curbs to jump off of or grind, express myself through tricks and just create my own skate park.
That's really cool. I remember doing some of those things, creating ramps and things back in the day. That's really cool. I definitely give a shout out to bikers and skateboarders. I feel like y'all are like the real life daredevils, you know. Be safe out there, definitely. Let's go. Who's next?
No, it's me.
All right, awesome, Sergio.
There's a sometimes that my mom goes to a swap meet, and that swap meet is in a parking lot of a local high school. So sometimes I help her out and set up and yeah.
Awesome. So the high school is being used for economic opportunity. That's really awesome.
Yes, sir.
Let's go to Rebecca and then Nestor.
Hi. Growing up in junior high and high school, I lived up in the high desert. And so at the junior high behind it, there was like a large canyon that was open. And we would use it for cross country to like run through. And then there would also be like bikers using it and people on motorcycles. And sometimes people would dump stuff there.
So it's an all-purpose site, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Rebecca. Nestor?
Yeah, so my house is in an alley, and so growing up, I would use the alley to play soccer with my siblings and the neighbors. We'd use like the lamppost and the wall as goalposts, and we'd use it for multiple purposes, but mostly for soccer, to play soccer.
Nice. And then like you always have to like similar to like playing a sport in the middle of the street, you gotta yell car every time a car's coming. Well, hopefully you have someone looking out for the cars. But thank you for sharing that, Nestor. We'll go to Henry and then Maya.
So where I used to live, there used to be a supermarket that closed down. So so when it closed down, so me and my friends would go use the parking lot to be able to play like kickball, soccer, and other sports. So that was a way of us reusing the area.
Nice, thank you, Henry.
I used to live in Hillcrest in San Diego, and I lived by a hospital there. And beside the hospital and next to an apartment complex, there is this really skinny strip of grass. And I would use that to play ball with my dog because there weren't really any parks close by to us. So we made do with that small space.
Yeah, there's a lot of places where there are like open space in San Diego, but there's some parts that are definitely missing that. But no, yeah, thanks for sharing that, Maya. Let's go to Dre and then Manuel.
Yeah, so someone brought up skating, and that was kind of what I wanted to talk about too. Back in the day, there weren't a lot of skate parks as there are now, and especially like I'm from like low income, like super low income areas. And so a lot of kids would just street skate, but our go-to spot was usually like downtown LA because there's more stairs and like stuff you can like actually ride off of. And there's this spot that's like famously known in like the skating community, and it's not necessarily abandoned, but it's usually like an empty corner, but it has like a 16 step staircase, and you will have someone on the at the edge of the street like car, like don't go and stuff, but that was usually like what we would do.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Dre. Manuel, best setup?
Yeah. So like as a kid, when I'd go to like church, so like after church, there was like this little dry like lot right next to it. And so all the kids, we'd all play football after church. So that was pretty fun.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Manuel. We'll go to Claudia and then Philip.
I shared in the chat already. Did it not show up?
Let me see. Here we go. Thank you so much. I do not have open grass and open fields, my siblings and I. Oh, did I read that already?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, cool. We got Randy's in here, Paying's awesome. Let's go to Jamie and then Lil or Lil.
Do you say Jamie?
Yes.
Okay. I can't recall like a specific um like recreational aspect, but in middle school, because I live in Lake Elsinore, in middle school I would like after school I would go down to the lake with my friends and we would like um cross the street and like skip rocks on the lake and like yeah.
That's awesome. I don't think I know how to skip rocks that well. Still working on my skip rock game.
Me too.
All right, Lil. Maybe you're gonna put it in the chat or we'll come back to you. We'll go to Andres and then Chase.
I already shared.
Who was that, Chase or Andres?
Shit about the skating.
Oh, there's Chase Wojtowicz and then Chase Gill.
Oh, my bad.
Let's go to Chase Gill and then Andres.
I would say, so I'm from Northern California. So next to one of the high schools, there was like a pond, and around that pond, there was a trail, but they would also use that trail for like mountain biking and large cross country meets.
Sounds like good times. And I'm not sure if you had a chance to share, Philip.
Oh, okay, yeah. So,
Geez. Okay, so I grew up in the MacArthur Park area. Like for those of you who don't know, that's like the neighborhood like immediately west of downtown. Um, it was kind of gang. And when I was okay, so there's this one parking lot, right? Like if you can imagine like the northeast corner of my street, like there was like an office building, and then there was like their parking lot, like going north from there, there's a parking lot, and then like there was originally like a house there. And at some point, like that property owner bought out that house and like just asphalted it into like more parking lot. And so what my friends and I would do was like cut the chain link fence and like play anything we could in there. Like baseball, football, street hockey, skating, like didn't matter. And like after a while they kind of figured out like it was just going to happen, and they're like, okay, fine, you can do what you want. So yeah, that was awesome in that way.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Philip. We just have, I think, is it you, May, have you had a chance to share?
Not yet. Um, in middle school, my middle school was located around like a hill, so there was a trail around it. We would use that to have like a turkey trot every year. So I thought that was cool.
Y'all love a turkey trot. It's coming back around soon.
I don't think I'll be doing that again though. I can't run anymore.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on. But before we get into the lecture, I do want to go over some of the expectations around Canvas. Okay, let's see. Okay, Lil, it's Melissa Montoya. Awesome. Thank you for sharing in the chat, Melissa. My reception was bad, so I had to use Ruby's phone. Thank you, Ruby, for being helpful. My story memory that I want to share is when I was younger, there would be open land next to our house project, and we used to take our bikes up and down the mini dunes. Then some people had ATVs, and we would ride those around the open field. The neighborhood loved this area and kept the area clean. Good memories. Awesome. I hope y'all enjoy these icebreakers. I like to, bring up things that remind us how we use landscapes in unique ways. And thinking about that in context of like how you as a landscape architect can leverage your site designs to create those Hey City experiences for your end users. Okay, Payne. Okay, Payne wrote in the chat. Although I haven't noticed any repurposed landscapes in my immediate community, I did visit LA River during a previous studio session. The area around the river has been transformed into a space for recreation with bike paths and coffee shops lining the route. It's interesting to see how a riverbed that might have once been more functional or industrial has now become a vibrant spot where local residents can go cycling, take walks, and enjoy their surroundings. The combination of nature and urban amenities like cafes has turned the LA River area into a popular destination for relaxation and social activities, reflecting how landscapes can be creatively reused in modern cities. For sure. Thank you for sharing that, Payne. Again, I quickly want to share a little bit about what's expected for your use on Canvas. So hopefully you all can see my screen. But for each module, that's here weekly. And so, for example, in week 3, this may or may not have been available, but it will because of the publishing issue. So if you all were having issues with that, it should be accessible. What I will be doing is for our lectures, there will usually be questions, and that gets you completing these questions and submitting it to this link, get you those 25 points for the lecture engagement, right? So again, usually there'll be some questions that you'll have to complete that'll be connected to the lecture or discussion that we're having. And then there's the overview of the lecture and a link to the PowerPoint or a presentation for the lecture, just in case you need that for reference, okay? So again, for those that have not done so already, For week 3, there was lecture posted with a few questions that you needed to answer, along with the link to the lecture that was completed. So make sure that you're completing the lecture questions so that you all can be getting these points. The majority of the points for this course will come from the lecture engagement, as well as the research and reading that you all will be doing, okay? So I wanted to give that clarification just in case folks had any questions or concerns. We can address that because I did notice that this lecture didn't have any submissions. The goal would be once the lecture is completed for that day, you'll get a week to complete the questions. So the following Monday, for example, today, these questions would have been due. I don't put a deadline like I don't stop the collection of work, right? So if you don't meet it on the deadline, just turn in the assignment as soon as possible and make sure that it's done thoroughly so that you can get full points. But again, for example, today's lecture is posted here. There's going to be some questions around the video reflection. We'll have some questions around the common agenda and shared measurement and reflection of the video, another video that we'll watch, and again, the breakdown of the lecture along with the link to the lecture presentation is already on Canvas. Are there any questions on that or any concerns related to the assignments?
So the assignments are about the lecture itself?
Yeah, I did mention that there was some issues with the publishing. Look, I think that the assignments were published, but for whatever reason, the module wasn't published, so that may have interfered with the access to that. But I did want to go over that with you all today, just in case there were any questions. But yeah, that's pretty consistent. That may have been locked, so I apologize for that, students.
All right, thank you.
All right, cool deal.
On my campus, there's like nowhere to submit it. There's not like a submission box.
For the first lecture?
Yeah, for the landscape analysis. I just click on it and there's no like submit button. It just says 25 points possible.
Okay, let me see what I can do to fix that. What does it say? There we go. Thank you for flagging that. So you now should be able to submit that without issue. Refresh your screens and just confirm that you now have a submission link.
Yeah, it works. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you all for flagging that. So with that said, let's go ahead and get back into the lecture. Stop sharing the screen, go back to there. All right, so now we are going to get into collective impacts. So we're going to watch a quick video. It's about 5 minutes long. It's going to go over some of the core components of collective impact. Definitely write notes. We'll go over them again collectively, but this video does have a quick, insightful overview of what collective impact is. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get this started.
We believe the key is a framework called collective impact. You see, collective impact is the commitment of a group of organizations from different sectors to a common agenda for solving a specific social problem using a structured form of collaboration. In other words, it's multiple groups coming together to solve a single problem and doing it in an organized way. You see, I could do something and my neighbor could do something, but independently of each other, we're only going to have so much impact. If I get my neighbor to join me with the cause that I'm trying to do, and he gets another neighbor to join me, all of a sudden, we could actually make a big difference in our neighborhood. And that's the exact same opportunity that credit unions have. So this is a framework. It's like an open source way of thinking about solving problems. And there's a lot of organizations around the country that are coming together and having collective impact. There are 5 key elements to any well-run collective impact program or project. And I want to walk you through each of the 5. In fact, the entire course is built off of the 5. The different modules are going to be talking specifically about one of the 5 key components of collective impact. The first component is a common agenda. We have to know the problem that we're trying to solve. And that sounds obvious, but if you were to ask, the majority of your employees, what problem do you solve in the community? I bet we would really struggle to find a consistent answer. So what is the problem worth solving? What is the one thing? What is it that we care about so much that we will go to work every single day and we have clarity of vision of the problem that we're solving in our community? If we can't answer that question, then we don't yet have a common agenda. So we're going to talk about that. The second thing is a shared measurement system. How do we know if we're winning or losing? What is the score of the game? If we don't know how we're having an impact on the community and how that's impacting the growth of the credit union, then we're just guessing. We're living in limbo. We don't know the score. And so we need a shared measurement system to know what is working, what's not, and who's winning. The third key to collective impact is called mutually reinforcing activities. In other words, doing the same thing and doing it well. What is the activity that we're doing as a group that is going to move the needle as an outcome? So we have to pick something. We can't all be scattered around doing our own thing. We have to pick something and do it collectively if we want to move the needle. The fourth thing is constant communication. So this is the reporting. This is taking that data that we got in the measurement system, running the mutually reinforcing activity, and then communicating back to the shareholders, so to your executive team, to your staff, to your board, to your memberships, and then to the community at large. Is it working? How well is it working? What are the trends? What does the data say? And so we have to be communicating the results and the data back to the key stakeholders for it to be consistent. And then the fifth and final element of collective impact is what's called a backbone support organization. You see, these things don't happen by themselves. They don't happen by random thoughts that, magically a bunch of organizations come together with a common agenda and mutually reinforcing activities. It takes leadership. It takes a backbone organization. And that's really critical. And so we'll talk a lot about, CIF's role in collective impact and some of the other partners that are stepping up to really help credit unions go to the next level when it comes to impact. So that's the high level overview of what collective impact is. And we honestly believe that credit unions have just this amazing, unique opportunity to come together in what we are, cooperative, and move the needle in solving real problems in our communities like never before. And the time is now. And so we're excited to show you a little bit more.
All right. So you should still be able to see my screen. One second. I'll take this. Back here. So quickly, we'll have a quick chat on that video. There's a few questions that I want you all to be thinking about in relation to the video that we just watched. And the first one is, what are the 5 components of collective impact? Who wants to take a try at that?
Do we share all of them or just one?
You can share one. Share some of the wealth around. Why not?
One is shared measurement system.
A shared measurement system, yes. It is important to have a shared measurement in regards to the intended outcomes and how that will be evaluated over time. And that needs to be something that everyone that's participating in the collective impact initiative, should be on the same page of, or understand the component that you're focusing on is. What's another one?
I can go. So another one would be sharing a common agenda, having one goal.
Common agenda. Common agenda is big. So you have shared measurement, common agenda. Let's say in this context, it'd be like a landscape architect focused effort, right? And the common agenda could be some of those social determinants of health issues that folks are, putting their energy around, whether that be social context, community context, or even economic opportunity, right? But that common agenda is key. Thank you so much for that, Carla. What is another one where we got 2 out of 5? We're on number 3.
Mutually and sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Mutually enforcing activities.
Also, that's a really great one. That one is really, how is the group actively engaging with each other to achieve said outcome? That can look like community events like charrettes. That could be a working group with key stakeholders where key roles and responsibilities are clarified and delineated, delegated based off of who's leading what task. But those mutual reinforcing activities are really critical to ensure effectiveness. So that's 3 out of 4. We're on number 4.
Continuous communication.
Continuous communication. That is critical, right? Making sure that folks know what progress is being made, if there's any changes to the common agenda, what are those shared measurements, all of that information should be available to everyone participating in other key stakeholders. Maybe even there's a public information campaign to ensure folks are aware of what's happening with the common agenda, but that communication is super, super critical. Thanks for that. And what's that last one?
Backbone support system.
A backbone support system. So yes, like many group projects, right? There needs to be someone who holds the crux of everything. And so with collective impact, there's a community centered approach, or a stakeholder who really holds the backbone of the effort and really probably leads the communication, leads in the collection and record keeping of files and information, right? Leads in leads in those things. And so really, again, ensuring that, let's say if there's another group that's playing a key role and responsibility, even keeping them informed about their role and what the due dates are, right? And so really kind of being that library of information for the whole cause, and may even lead some of the key initiatives to achieve the said outcome. So moving on to the next question. How does continuous communication foster trust among stakeholders, and what platforms or methods are most effective in maintaining this communication? This could be based off of your perspective. Maybe you have experience in that, but especially to the first part of it, honest communication. And let's say for questions 2, 3, and 4, you could choose which one you want to answer. So 2 is, how does continuous communication foster trust among stakeholders? 3 is, what ways can backbone organizations ensure that they remain neutral while facilitating tasks, and what strategies can be used to align mutual reinforcing activities across organizations? I gave a few examples of some of these while I was talking, but what comes to mind for y'all?
I would love to take a stab at this. I'm actually super excited that you're talking about this because, as you know, I'm the horticulturist for San Diego Natural History Museum, and we have a brand new native garden as an exhibit in Balboa Park, and that's quite new to Balboa Park. And as me by myself can't do all the programming around the education that is needed for that exhibit. So currently I'm actually forming a garden advisory committee for the San Diego Natural History Museum for our garden, and that involves California Native Plant Society. We have a Native West Nursery, and then we have Tree of Life Nursery, Mike Evans. We also have our own curators as well, you know, our curator of botany, our curator of entomologist, and we have volunteers in the garden as well. That's going to be part of the advisory committee. So more local community members that are stakeholders. And one way of fostering trust among the stakeholders right now that I'm doing is I'm holding an inaugural meeting at the museum, and also letting them know that this will be a consistent, you know, quarterly meeting to, just like you said earlier, you know, sharing data, you know, first of all, identifying our goal, right? And coming up with a shared measurement data of like, how are we going to measure what we're trying to accomplish? And as different individual organizations, like, what are we going to do? And so basically just talking about that. And, you know, I think the backboard support organization would be the museum itself. So yeah, I'm really happy we're talking about this today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And like you mentioned, that communication piece is super critical. And then the fostering trust, another thing to think about is ensuring that as you're communicating, the key stakeholders, especially the community, this community-centered approach, understand how this is responding to their vision, right? And ensuring that they understand that they're a partner and a collaborator in achieving the set outcome. Because sometimes it can be thought that they're not a decision maker, right? And so ensuring that they feel like they're a decision maker, and a part of that comes down to how it's communicated, but also the follow through, right? When you are making promises, or you know, decisions are being made, that it can be followed through with outcomes, right? And like you said, the museum is a key backbone entity, because they're facilitating the engagement of all of the key stakeholders, right? The community, other service providers, other people like funders, etc. So that's a good point. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else want to take a stab at one of these questions? I don't want to pick on folks, but I can. But if we can get a volunteer to jump in, I'll give it a couple of more seconds.
Some people have commented in the chat.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Let's see. Claudia, continuous communication fosters trust among the stakeholders by providing continuous collaborative support across stakeholder groups. It allows discussions and issues and concerns throughout the project or program to be addressed. The platforms or methods that are most effective gathering in one place, whether it be in person or online meetings, and continuous phone calls, emails through project. Yes, 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 and yes. Great examples, Claudia. Definitely using platforms like Zoom is a very effective way to engage folks. I know during the time of COVID, a lot of things went virtual and in ways that made things more accessible. You know, most of us live in LA County, so we know how hard it is sometimes to get across town to attend an in-person meeting, right? So sometimes virtual hybrid options and so on and so forth make it convenient for folks to engage. But like you said, that feedback loop is super critical throughout the process. So having monthly, weekly, quarterly meetings, just really defining what your cadence is for your project and ensuring that that check-in does happen. And so that issues can be addressed as soon as they arise versus like waiting for them. Because let's say if you are implementing something, as soon as the issue arises, you can address it versus getting, you know, a quarter or third of the way through implementation and then issues are being brought up. So now you have to, you know, go back to the starting block and invest more money in something that you already thought you completed good. But again, that feedback loop is critical. And that's one of the reasons why community engagement is important, because it oftentimes allows community members to be partners in the process. And so, like you said, some of the methods, going in person or virtually, also structure of meetings, like most of the time it can be working groups. Most of the time working groups are set up with the focus of an end goal in mind. And sometimes you may have to set up a general meeting for the working group and then have sub meetings like subcommittee meetings that go towards specific tasks members of the working group are most effective at or have the jurisdiction over, right? Like if it's a issue with government and you know that someone has really effective relationships with your local politicians, they may want to lead the engagement with local governments. If it's someone who engages community-based organizations well, then that subcommittee can be led by that person or that group, right? And so really, really defining what that method is and ensuring that your meetings are actually being effective, right? And that people aren't just meeting just to meet, but they're meeting either to hear updates on what progress has been made, and then delegation of tasks for the next time that you meet, right? So between meetings, action should be taking place, and any subcommittee meetings that are more focused should happen in between those larger meetings. So really just defining what that is for your engagement is really critical. We'll take a couple of more share outs before we go on break. Anybody want to take a stab at, I hate using stab. Anybody want to take a try at what strategies can be used to align mutually reinforcing activities? Or in what
I
way?
can take a.
Okay, cool. What comes to mind for you?
Number 4, right?
Yes.
I think like strategies that can be used would probably be like those activities being like relatively similar in a sense. I think like let's say if people are going out looking for like community feedback, then it can be that same kind of work, just maybe in different areas. Like they might ask somebody about how the traffic is in the area, but then somebody else might ask another neighbor, what do they feel about like the how many like what would I say? Like what they feel about like if there's trees, no trees, like the landscape of the area, and others can be asked like what about like services, public services, if they feel like their needs are being met. So just the same thing, but different questions for different people.
Indeed, indeed. So really trying to figure out what issues are most priority and prioritizing like engagement and questions based off of that. I like that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. I like that a lot because certain stakeholders may have, subject matter expertise, and you want to make sure that they're leveraging that. They may have networks and get relationships that can be used to address those different issues like traffic. And so leveraging those relationships are critical. There are a lot of organizations that focus on, for example, pedestrian safety. So within your area of focus, you can make sure that you're engaging those organizations and even getting insight on existing materials. So outside of direct engagement, they may have existing reports, right, that they've done over the last few years, which gives you insight on that matter. So definitely leveraging those strategies of engagement are really important to get the core amount of information and understanding, again, across organizations, what challenges, what missions are most relevant, and how to coordinate them across the activities that need to be addressed. Another thing that comes to mind too, when I'm thinking of this, especially from what you were just saying, is the opportunity to help build capacity, right? So strategies to build capacity. Some organizations, let's say, may have the subject matter expertise, but they don't have the capacity. They may be short on staffing. And so another thing is, let's say there's a lot of community-based leaders that are not connected to an organization, but they're heavily involved in community engagement practices. For example, in LA, there's groups of folks called the promoteras, if I'm saying that right. And they're really, most of the time, mothers in the community, Spanish communities, Spanish-speaking communities, where they know what's going on. They know what services are available. They know what community-based organizations are having programs that are most relevant to the people that they represent. And they make sure that that information is provided to the community. So partnering with those individuals, for example, is very helpful to get the word out. But a lot of opportunities come with, like, again, building their capacity. Compensation is a big thing. So if you work for an organization that has a budget for community outreach and engagement, a lot of times thinking about like how community organizations or community leaders can be compensated for their time. That's a really great way to ensure that they have the capacity to participate in those mutual reinforcing activities, because it does take a lot of time. They may have to travel, they may have to get babysitters and things of that nature to participate. So in ways that you can create capacity and provide resources and support to improve the folks you can engage is really important. I'm gonna read the responses we have in the chat, and then we can go on break. Melissa puts, I used to do home loans. Oh, my fan is giving me the little allergy, excuse me. I used to do home loans for a private housing developer. As far as continuous communication with the builders, developers, city planning, I would be on the to go talk to everyone nice, exactly. And I would write down everything, including questions that they have, and I would run around and bring everyone in the thing together. That's super critical, Melissa, because you have to understand all of the stakeholders' interests and figure out how to create alignment. And oftentimes they have competing interests. However, they may have aligned values. And they may think that they're adversaries, but after you talk to both of them, you see a lot of ways where they're looking for the same outcomes. Or you see that, let's say, one stakeholder has an economic component of interest, and the community is also looking for workforce development. So it's like, okay, well, jobs creation is a part of economic opportunity. Those are common interests there. So how can we create that common interest where this site can be used to generate income and create opportunities for the community directly, right? And so those things are really critical to align across stakeholder groups. And then you talked about developers, you talked about city planning. A big thing with the developers and city planning, developers have big wish lists all the time, right? And oftentimes your project is going to have a big wish list, all the things that it wants to do. The best thing you could do is ensure that your wish list is aligned to city ordinances, zoning practices, policies, or initiatives that are, again, aligned or relevant to the issue that you're trying to address. So the more you as a developer, a designer, or a landscape architect could align your vision to what the city is already, doing, you're going to have to do that in relation to compliance and policy. But again, they may have initiatives that are focused on green space development. And if your project is aligned to that and it's operating, let's say, in a council district and within that city, being able to pull in language that shows that strategic alignment really does help with getting support from your local electeds. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And again, that stakeholder alignment is critical in helping them see their common interests versus all the things that deter them from partnering. Pei-Ying, thank you for putting this in the chat. Continuous communication and shared measurement help landscape architects prioritize design elements that align with the collective vision. A common agenda ensures goals match community needs, and coordinated activities ensure each design choice supports broader objectives like sustainability, accessibility, and community engagement. I love that. I love that. I love that. Right. And so with a collective impact approach, all of these things are planned at the forefront. A lot of times you'll come up with a good idea and you go straight to implementation, but it's critical to plan these things out. And theories of change really provides a clear framework to help guide what that planning should consist of, so that as things are implemented, you can do a check and balance of, okay, we're accomplishing this. Yes, we're reaching our sustainability goals. Yes, we've achieved our goals around community engagement. Yes, this is being designed with universal design consideration, so that accessibility is effective and everyone can access this site without any barriers, right? And so thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you all so much for participating in this class discussion around the collective impact video that we just watched. We are about to go on break for a quick 5 minutes. So feel free to use the restroom, get some water, grab a snack, and we'll be back shortly. Let's say 7:06, we'll be back. I'll play some lo-fi music until then, but go ahead and go on break and I'll see you back shortly.
All right, we should be working our ways back in. Please give me a thumbs up if you are back with me. All right, I see some folks are giving their thumbs up. Is 5 minutes enough for a break for y'all, or should it be longer? Put in the chat 5 minutes or 5 for that's fine, and then 10 if you feel like it should be longer. Should the chat be 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Put in the chat what you voting for. Five started off strong, 10s is coming in at the end. Okay. Okay, looks like the 10s might have won. 5 started off strong, but 10s brought it home. All right, so for the next class period, we'll do a break for 10 minutes. That way folks can, get their water, take the bathroom break, bio break, or whatever as needed during that time. All right. So we'll do another round of thumbs up just to let me know folks are back. Right. So the video that we talked about, we just watched, went over collective impact and the 5 components of it. Just to review, what is collective impact? It's a large-scale social change effort that requires broad sector coordination, yet the social sector remains focused on isolated interventions of individual organizations. Most of the time is used for that. However, we're using it in the context of landscape architecture and leveraging this approach for collective impact in relation to your community engagement efforts for landscape architecture projects. So we know the 5 areas of focus are common agenda, shared measurement, mutual reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and backbone support from a critical organization, right? So let's go over these definitions one more time. I'm gonna get some volunteers
to read number 1, common agenda?
Yeah, I'll read it.
Go ahead, Chase.
Okay, collective impact requires all participants to have a shared vision for change, one that includes a common understanding of the problem and a joint approach to solving it through agreed upon actions.
So we talked a little bit about what that looks like. And so what I'm excited about in a minute or two, we'll be able to do some work through what this looks like, common agenda and share measurements through a case study. Thank you for reading that, Chase. Who wants to read number 2, share measurement?
Shared measurement system. Developing a shared measurement system is essential to collective impact. Agreement on a common agenda is illusory without an agreement on the ways success will be measured and reported.
Awesome. Number 3.
Mutually reinforcing activities. Collective impact initiatives depend on a diverse group of stakeholders working together, not by requiring that all participants do the same thing, but by encouraging each participant to undertake the specific set of activities at which it excels in a way that supports and is coordinated with the actions of others.
Awesome. And number 4.
I could read it.
Awesome.
Developing trust among nonprofits, corporations, and government agencies is a monumental challenge. Participants need several years of regular meetings to build up enough experience with each other to recognize and appreciate the common motivation behind their different efforts.
And this is the best case scenario. Sometimes you won't have several years. Oftentimes though, like let's say with policy work, where I've used collective impact often, policy work sometimes does take several years to achieve a desired outcome. Because once you get the policy passed, you then have to work towards what that policy looks like in implementation. However, for a landscape design project, some of that work probably would have preceded you, right? And you're coming in where some of that footwork probably has been conducted already. So you're now at the project implementation piece. So you can do a landscape analysis to understand what that year's work has been, but your project may be confined to, you know, a 9-month to a 1 to 3 year project delivery date, right? So it just really depends on the circumstances, the project scope of work and your timeline. But again, when we're talking about the research and landscape analysis, that's where you may get insight on that years long work that went into achieving the effort that is now being developed into a landscape design project, right? So just be mindful that when you're coming in, you're probably coming in at a point that was preceded by efforts that probably took years long. And so getting insight on that work and how it's relevant to your project is going to be really critical. And then the last one, number 5.
Sure, I'll go. Creating and managing collective impact requires a separate organization and staff with a very specific set of skills to serve as the backbone for the entire initiative.
Indeed, right? And so the organization that takes up that effort has to be set up for that. You know, for example, Growing Greatness Now, we are a consulting firm that focuses on policy and urban design consulting. And let's say we're more of a supportive component to a project versus like the backbone entity. And oftentimes the backbone entity should have like, let's say, enough staffing, right? to coordinate some of that backbone support work. They should have funding sources that allow the activities around the role of backbone support to be funded effectively, right? When we're talking about communications, it takes money, right, to keep like, let's say, a Google Suite together, right? So you really want to make sure that you're working with an organization that has the capacity for that role. And then also being mindful of how the backbone supportive organization is also facilitating the engagement of all other key stakeholders. All right, so we are now going to think about this in context of what we learned last week, right? And so examples of common agenda and social determinants of health. These are just the ideas of like how, let's say, a common agenda may look for, let's say, your initiative. So if there's a collective impact entity and they're focusing on neighborhood and built environment, the project scope deliverable may have a goal to increase the proportion of people whose water supply meets safety standards, right? It may have a goal to reduce the amount of toxic pollutants released into the environment. And so when you have these goals, you want to be able to say, okay, this deliverable, let's say it's an element to your design based off of the plant that you're using, based off of the hardscape or landscape design components. You may have, like, let's say a water capture component. You may have a carbon drawdown, a sequestration component to it, right? So thinking about how your project is responsive to these goals that were outlined by the collective impact group and associated directly with it. This goes back also to when I was mentioning, let's say, an initiative from the local government. If they have a goal to increase proportion of people whose water supply or reduce health and environmental risk related to hazardous sites, and you know that your project is aligned to that initiative, you want to bring that in. And let's say you're working with a stakeholder who doesn't have that insight, providing that insight could be helpful to the to achieving the stakeholders' vision as well. So being mindful of that. Another example related to the social determinants of health that we learned last week could be the social community context component. The idea that, let's say, creating some shrubs in your landscape design that includes the milkweed plant that is good for the monarch butterfly, right? That's going to be big because it will release stress, because folks who are walking down the street and come across butterflies, those that don't have a phobia for them, they think that butterflies are very relaxing, or the idea that birds are going to be around using, let's say, a water feature that you put in your site. Being able to connect the dots on the ways that your site addresses, again, the social and community context that are coming out in your site-specific considerations. And a lot of you all talked about, in our icebreaker, the way that you've used some places for economic stability. Like, let's say, designating a parking lot for a farmer's market or a flea market or whatever. Those opportunities can be built into your landscape designs, right? And so thinking about how your project can be helpful for local entrepreneurs who do art or who make food, culturally relevant food for the community. Those things I think are really great examples of how you can create a common agenda and associate your design interventions, for example, in response to those common agendas. Any thoughts, ideas, or questions about the idea of connecting your common agenda to the examples of social determinants of health goals? And social determinants of health is a great guardrail or package to communicate some of your goals, because a lot of folks are aware of them. They go across industries, whether it be like city planning, health, you know, engineering and design, right? All these different intersections have interest in the social determinants of health. So using that as a value alignment tool to better understand again how your stakeholders' interests are coming up in relation to the social determinants of health, right? Are they addressing their interests of social and community context, neighborhood built environment, economic stability, are the other two of the five, right? Again, any thoughts or questions on that? I'll look in the chat to see if anything is coming up for folks. All right. Any thoughts, questions, comments on that before we move on? Is that giving a show a thumbs up? Is that resonating with folks? Is that making sense for folks? Just want to make sure that folks are getting the information before we move on. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Awesome, awesome. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to put our learning to a test, right? And so we have this wonderful activity. It's a case study on how a food policy in Cincinnati used collective impact model. I actually used to work for the Food Policy Council here in the city of Los Angeles. They also have a collective impact model approach, and we'll probably look at some videos from them in future classes, but I really like this collective impact model application that the Cincinnati Food Policy Council communicated. And so what I would like you all to do is listen to this video, and then what I'll do is give you the link to the video and break you off into groups where you will have an opportunity to answer the set of questions that I've set aside for this discussion, okay, around common agenda setting and then also shared measurements. So again, you're looking for those two components today. We'll continue this exercise in our next class where we'll look at the other components of collective impact. But right now, we'll go ahead and listen to this case study. Any questions before I start the video? All right.
This is Amanda Lucas again. Welcome to part 2 of the Collective Impact Model overview. I will be outlining its application to the Food Policy Council more specifically. Part of the research process the staff of the Food Policy Council completed is through the 2022 strategic planning process. The strategic planning process was completed through the collection of qualitative data spread across dozens of interviews from network members. There were several recommendations that are currently being implemented. In addition, research over major policies being decided or implemented in 2023 were conducted as part of the Food Policy Council onboarding process. Some of the policies include the Food Donation Improvement Act, the 2023 Farm Bill, and Food is Medicine policies. Another part of the research will be completed during the meetings of the full council and committee members. Your conversation and decision-making will guide next steps. The full council members will be responsible, with plenty of support from the staff, for deciding which of the policies and programs will be focused on for 2023. From there, our actions will be delegated among council and committee members in order to enact change in the 10 counties of Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky the Food Policy Council represents. Before I discuss how the roles of the collective impact model apply to the Food Policy Council, please note that some of our work will be supporting partner organizations and collaboratives in their advocacy work at the state, regional, and federal levels. I will mention that in our collaborative, the backbone staff acts as an intermediate between the partners and the funders. And I'll say more about the backbone staff in a moment as I expand upon our role in a future slide. For the Food Policy Council, there are currently 2 funders that financially support the Food Policy Council's work. One funder is the USDA's Farm to School grant, and the other is the USDA's Regional Food Systems Partnership, or RFSP grant. Funders do influence some of the work completed by a collective, but Backbone staff can help filter that influence and find other revenue streams that allow for more independence in what work is accomplished. The Food Policy Council and committee members are the partners within the collaborative. It is the council and committee members who provide guidance and feedback on future projects and resource development. The partners take the resources, networking, and funding that Backbone helps develop and runs with it to put it into action. The partners get support from the consulting members. The consulting members of the Food Policy Council are our grant partners. Grant partners implement and manage day-to-day grant deliverables, but also participate on the full council and its committees. The consulting members differ from the full council members through their embodiment of the words counsel or advice giving. As part of their day-to-day work, the consulting members are responsible for providing feedback to the council of how the programs are progressing as part of the evaluation process. Researchers are not explicitly represented in the current structure of the Food Policy Council. However, there are several council members whose knowledge and research background can help guide our data collection methods. Plus, Green Umbrella works with the local firm Data Bloom on data collection projects. I already mentioned the policymakers and the community members in the previous video. However, we want to re-emphasize that policymakers within the regional food system can also include developers and managers of programmatic concepts like farm to school and workplace CSA incentives. Community members are any individuals who participate within the regional food system, which basically means everyone. Here, I will describe the Backbone staff. Our Food Policy Council's Backbone staff consists of 2 people, Maddie Chera, the director of the Food Policy Council, and myself. However, there are 2 additional people who contribute part of their professional time to the work of the Food Policy Council as Backbone staff. These 2 team members, Christine, the Farm to School coordinator, a contractor for Green Umbrella, and Cynthia, a Green Umbrella staff member who serves as both the Green Yards coordinator for CPS Outside and as our agricultural education curriculum coordinator, are invited to act as consulting members of the Food Policy Council. However, the Backbone staff role is primarily fulfilled by Maddie and myself. As you can see from the list on this slide, there are 5 top priorities of the Backbone staff. The top 2 priorities of guiding the vision and strategic plan and supporting aligned activities are currently being fulfilled through the development of onboarding resources like this video and materials about our 2022 strategic planning process and grant projects. However, as the year goes on, additional priorities were raised to the top and our support will take different forms. The trust and relationships we build within the regional food system is vital to accomplish systems and population level change. The collaborative must first build trust within itself, which is part of the onboarding process. The onboarding process provides clarity on our roles and what the expectations of those roles are. Plus, it creates a shared language for the work of the Food Policy Council. I'm not going to read line by line the ways trust is built within a collective impact model like ours. However, after a short pause so you can read through the slide, I am going to highlight a couple of important points. A few things you can expect from the Backbone staff to help build trust are: A, creating a clear, concise living agenda that allows for an understanding of what decisions and tasks must be completed during the full council and committee meetings. B, continual updates and feedback about policies, grant projects, and partners. And C, the facilitation of equitable, safe space meetings where potentially difficult conversations can occur with the understanding of mutual respect and willingness to compromise when necessary. Having a council where so many points of view through both work and lived experiences involved in the decision-making process isn't easy. It's necessary, though. Remember, the Food Policy Council is doing something extra difficult. We aren't just focusing on one of the 4 categories, aka the committee groups, which in and of themselves are difficult topics to discuss and decide action upon. We are trying to look at the regional food system through the lens of the entire system, and the backbone staff is here to keep that in perspective and support this difficult process. Through conversation and decision-making, we are creating a common agenda that benefits the most people participating in the regional food system. Now, is this process and its impact going to be perfect? Absolutely not. The Food Policy Council is not a perfect model of collective impact, as there's no such thing, but the collective impact model guides how the Food Policy Council operates. We don't want perfect to be the enemy of good. Again, here are the references and resources. Thank you so much for listening. Reach out to me if you have any questions.
All right. So now that was a really cool video. Again, this was collective impact in action, looking at the work of the Greater Cincinnati Region Food Policy Council and how they applied collective impact to their work. We are now going to do let's have a quick discussion together in regards to some of the stakeholders that were identified in relation to this effort. So let's go here. Again, last week we talked about who are the stakeholders, right? In this case study, what are some of the stakeholders that came up in the conversation?
Community members was one, and policymakers.
Policymakers, community members, yes. So we got government as well as community stakeholders. What were some of the examples of the government stakeholders that were mentioned? See somebody wrote in the chat. Researchers, very, very true.
The USDA.
The USDA, yes, yes. They mentioned funders, right? What ways was the environment a stakeholder? Did anyone catch any ways that the environment was represented as a stakeholder? Well, we'll get more into the stakeholder component once we get to the backbone entity. but I do want to make sure we have time for our breakout sessions. However, be mindful of the stakeholders. There's stakeholders involved in all of the work that we do. And these are the main group of stakeholders oftentimes that come up: government, local, state, and federal government, the elected council members, and also hired public servants that work for the different departments, right, at the local, state, and federal level. You also have the non-governmental organizations, neighborhood councils. At the community level, you have community-based organizations, for example, like the Food Policy Council in this case, but there are other organizations that they're working with. Small businesses were mentioned, entrepreneurs, residents, as well as funders, right? And when we're talking about food, a big part of this conversation could be related to how food is grown, and the accessibility of that is dependent on the environment, right? The regional climate of your location, because if it's not being grown locally, then that means that it's being shipped in, right? And so that's a whole nother conversation. So the environment is a component in regards to whether or not food can be sourced locally, or if this is more of like a supply chain component that has to be facilitated, again, through this local and government stakeholder component in regards to how, trade and commerce is facilitated within that region. So again, always try to find the environment as a stakeholder in the conversation, because a lot of times the conversation does involve the environment, but it's not always clear. And your role as a landscape architect could be bringing that out or clarifying the different ways that the environment is a stakeholder in the conversation. What I'm going to do is now have us break out into groups. We'll have about 20 minutes. We'll work on common agenda first, and then we'll go into the shared measurements. The groups are about 5 or 6 group members each. And again, we'll be working for about 20 minutes. And the goal is to answer these questions. What is the common agenda for the collective impact initiative that we just learned about? How have stakeholders from the different sectors been involved in defining the common agenda? And what strategies have been used to ensure all voices are heard? What processes were employed to develop a shared understanding of the food policy challenges, and how were conflicting viewpoints reconciled? What specific agreed upon actions have been outlined in the common agenda, and how do they align with each stakeholder's goals and capacities? How is the common agenda being communicated across all stakeholders to ensure clarity and commitment to the shared vision? And what mechanisms are in place to ensure ongoing alignment with the common agenda as new stakeholders join or as external factors impact the food policy landscape? So again, we'll have about 20 minutes to work through those questions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's about 4 minutes on each question. We'll go ahead and break you all out into groups. We'll come back and we'll debrief what your group talked about. We'll probably have, each group share one of their questions. And then we'll go into the next breakout session. Are there any questions before we get started? Okay, so what I am going to do, you all should already have access to the lecture via Canvas, but I'm going to put the video, the videos in the lecture. So you leverage your Canvas, pull that open so that you can access the video and these questions and work through them with your group. And I'll put I'll put it in the chat as well, the lecture in the chat as well, so it's easier to access. So with that said, I'll open up the room since there are no questions. You'll have about 20 minutes and then we'll come back.
Hello, Professor. Can I mention something before I go to my room?
Sure.
I just wanted to apologize because I was a little late for your class. I think you noticed I run into something right before logging into the class, but I'm looking forward to asking my classmates what we discussed at the beginning of the class.
Awesome. And I'll work on getting the lecture posted on YouTube, and I'll send that link out as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. And then also I just wanted to remind you, I know we discussed this a little bit in the last class, but I added the class on the last day available. I think it was September 5th or September 4th to add the class, or it's September 7th, the last day available to add more classes. So I'm getting on track on your class, but I'm gonna be submitting the assignments as soon as possible. I think I already submit the first one, the walkthrough. But I'm working on this, on the assignments that are due.
Awesome. Well, I'll be on the lookout for those completed assignments once they're submitted. And yeah, we'll go from there. But thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to learning collaboratively with you throughout the semester.
Thank you. Okay.
Dre, did you need to speak with me? Or do you need access to one of the groups? I think you just need to accept your group.
So I feel like for the second question, like how is the common agenda being communicated across all stakeholders to ensure what gravitated me was that very clear poster that they've created for everyone to kind of outline and follow since this is a new policy that they are going through. And I saw Claudia, you had a
Make sure you all are, discussing with each other that way. If folks got something that maybe you didn't, that can be, informing folks' considerations. Make sure y'all are talking through these questions with each other so that you're learning from each other. Some folks may be thinking of it a total different way. And you definitely want to make sure that that's being captured. So you can put it in the chat or you can say it out loud, but yeah, make sure y'all discussing these questions with each other in the group.
we were just typing it in.
Awesome.
Yeah, Isaac sounds like he's a great note taker. Yeah, guys, like if you look.
We have about 10 minutes left. Make sure y'all are discussing, these questions amongst each other. That way we're doing some shared learning. There may be ways that you all are thinking about this differently and we can learn from each other. So make sure you're talking through these questions together. I see folks are coming back. We'll give folks a couple of more seconds to get all the way back. All right. So we split up into 4 groups and went over the common agenda questions. Let's go ahead and go to group 1. We'll go ahead and share out for about 10 minutes before we break off into another group. We'll probably like 7 minutes so that we can get to the next session set of questions. But yeah, group 1. We're going to talk to you about what came up for your first response. The first response. How have stakeholders from different sectors been involved in defining the common agenda, and what strategies have been used to ensure our voices are heard? What came up for you when thinking about the video we watched, the case study for the Food Policy Council? All right. So for group 1, Paying is responding in the chat. Strategies include different sectors have been involved in inclusive meetings, workshops, and feedback loops to ensure diverse perspectives are captured and integrated into the collective agenda. Awesome, awesome. Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I think they mentioned research over major food policies and the collaboration of the council members with their support staff to go over those policies and decide which they'll use to dictate the programs for the year.
And that goes back to that policy alignment, right? Understanding what policy initiatives are aligned to your group's efforts, and ensuring that you're engaging the local officials and getting their buy-in as well as their support and guidance in regards to ensuring that alignment is there. So yeah, utilizing those resources that are available. So thank you so much for that addition, Issy. Let's go to question number 2 and group number 2. What processes were employed to develop a shared understanding of the food policy challenges, and how were conflicting viewpoints reconciled?
I think they mentioned something about school staff who were working on the programs, speaking to backbone staff and checking in with them to communicate their needs. Yeah, that's what I got from that question.
Awesome. So making sure that there were clear lines of communication between the school staff and the backbone organization. What's coming up for anyone else? Anybody else want to add to that? Anybody else for group 2?
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
there's other processes that we thought that they developed well was creating that poster of outlining their vision of why it's important, what is it, and how they're going to do it, and also what is the outcome of the new policies. So that was really great. Sorry, you're muted, Preston.
It's always that mute button. Thanks for sharing that, Carla. I also see Abdul put in the chat, the Food Policy Council developed a shared understanding through a strategic planning process with interviews and collaborative meetings. Conflicting viewpoints were addressed through open discussions, clear agendas, regular updates, and support from the backbone staff to foster mutual respect and compromise. Another thing I heard in the video was that they had an onboarding process. And I think that that's really critical, right? For folks who are coming in at different points, you know, there may have been work done. And so if you're coming from the outside, maybe not have, you know, been involved in the previous components of it, getting onboarded is a great way to ensure that there is, you know, less confusion when you're a new member to the working group or to the space. And so, yeah, that was another thing that came up in the video. Who else thought of the onboarding as a way to address challenges? And who wants to talk more about that? Why is onboarding important? So what processes were employed to develop a shared understanding, and how were conflicting viewpoints reconciled? How does onboarding address that?
I think onboarding can help explain some of the different opinions that people might have and that you might encounter while you're working for somebody. And they can kind of help guide you on how to respond when those things come up. So it just gets people prepared for what kind of responses they can expect.
Indeed, and even channel some of that perspective into like the right area of the project, because it may not be, let's say, for, you know, one effort, but that consideration could be very important consideration for, let's say, the policy focus or whatever. So yeah, thank you for jumping in there, Maya. All right, let's move on to question number 3. In group number 3, what specific agreed upon actions have been outlined in the common agenda, and how do they align with each stakeholder's goals and capacities?
What we came up with was mutually enforcing activities with the group effort, just so that everyone's agenda or issues are all being heard, and so that they can all be addressed fairly.
Awesome. Anybody want to add to that? Anybody else from group number 3 want to add to that? Either verbally or in the chat. All right, paying in the chat, agreed upon actions could be concrete steps that align with capacities of each stakeholder, ensuring that they contribute effectively to the shared vision while pursuing their goals. And how was that represented in the video? What are your thoughts on how they communicated that, and how did the Food Policy Council communicate that? Anybody can jump in there. How did they assign roles and responsibilities in a way that was aligned to capabilities of each stakeholder? What came up, like what discussion were y'all group having around that dialogue? Raise your hand if you were in group 3. Maybe it's because there's no one here from group 3. That's probably what it is. Is group 3 still in the house? Okay, Chase, you want to jump in there?
Can you repeat the question really quick? Sorry.
Yeah, so the question is in regards to question number 3. What specific agreed upon actions have been outlined in the common agenda, and how do they align with each stakeholder's goals and capacities? So like, how did they, assign roles and responsibilities in relation to the capabilities of stakeholders? I know some of the stakeholders that came up were like the council members. They talked about the school workers, as well as the backbone organization, different participants. So like, what roles were assigned?
Would it just be based off of, I don't know if I fully remember, but I'll just try taking a guess to at least try. But based off of their like specialties and what they understand. That might be wrong.
Well, yeah, it was definitely based off their specialties. One of the stakeholders were the council members, and that they were leveraged for research, right? And I'm assuming because they have so many stakeholders, and their research was very helpful with developing a common agenda and leveraging it as a resource to inform what that should be. But there were other stakeholders that came up as well, if anybody wants to add to their roles. But thank you for jumping in there, Chase.
No problem.
All right, let's go to group number 4. The last question is, we actually have 5 questions. But number 4 is, how is the common agenda being communicated across all stakeholders to ensure clarity and commitment to the shared vision for change?
Yeah, so that was us. So we saw that like for to have like the communication, the clarity and all that. So a lot of the stuff was like they had through like meetings, they would like clarify roles. They like make sure everybody knows what the responsibility is and like what they're expected to achieve. They also like focused on having like relationships like between both like assets, like stakeholders and the people, so like the community. They're also like had more like conversations focused on like difficult questions and also like negotiating like interests between them. And so basically just finding that like common ground. And they also used like celebrating small and large like wins so that like they stay motivated. And then
Amen to that.
yeah.
Those are some really, really great examples. And I think one of the ones you mentioned could connect to one of the previous questions as well, right? The idea of addressing concerns and conflicting viewpoints reconciled, right? Having those
Yeah.
hard conversations, right? Creating a safe space where challenging questions can come up and they can, be worked through within that community space with all the stakeholders there. And similar to how we're doing in this course, in this class, is facilitate that shared learning, right? When folks are sharing ideas collectively, it may spark an idea in somebody else. It may allow someone to remember their expertise and their own capacity in certain areas. So yeah, those are some really great examples. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
So we have one more before we go to the next one. This is, what mechanisms are in place to ensure ongoing alignment with the common agenda as new stakeholders join or as external factors impact the food policy landscape? And I talked a little bit about this for another one, but I think it's relevant for this as well. Who wants to jump in there? Let's go back to group number 1. Somebody from group number 1 jump in there and tackle the mechanisms in place to ensure ongoing alignment.
I think you talked about onboarding before, but I think that could work here as well. As new stakeholders join, they talked about creating a shared language so that everybody involved in the process is kind of on the same page. in terms of like goals and research methods and I think different tactics towards achieving those goals.
Yes, thank you, Issy, for jumping in there. And I see Paying wrote in the chat as well. Mechanisms may include periodic reviews, stakeholder onboarding process, as was just mentioned, and adaptive frameworks that allow the agenda to evolve as the situation changes, right? So that's really great to consider as well. So thank you all for working through that. Let's go ahead and get to this next portion of group convo. Gonna break out again into groups for this next set of questions, which is around shared measurement being used to measure the impact of initiatives. Okay. What data collection methods and tools will be used to ensure consistency and accuracy across all stakeholders in the food policy initiative? How will stakeholders ensure that the shared measurement system reflects the diverse needs and priorities of all communities affected by the food policy? What processes will be followed for reviewing and updating metrics to ensure that they remain relevant? And how will stakeholders use the shared data to inform decision-making? And lastly, what steps will be taken to ensure transparency in data sharing and reporting? And how will accountability be maintained across all parties involved? So again, you have access to the video to think through this question as well. Make sure you utilize that resource. And this link is in the chat as well as on Canvas. So I'm gonna go ahead and break us out into groups again. And we'll have another 20 minutes. And about 5 minutes to deep. Well, let's do 15 minutes. We'll come back around 8. Well, yeah, let's do until 8:35, and then we'll do 10 minutes debrief. But let's go for it. Hey, Sergio, were you in a group? What group were you in, Sergio? All right, folks should be back. Hope you all enjoyed your group discussion related to shared measurements in context of the case study that we watched the video of. So with that being said, we'll jump right into it. Group one, what did you all discuss in relation to what data collection methods and tools will be used to ensure consistency and accuracy across all stakeholders in the food policy initiative? In group one, we had Chase, Issy, Jasmine, Paying, and Randy. Randy, you want to jump in there? Paying surveys and feedback forms, data analytics platforms for aggregation and analysis, standardized reporting templates. Really, really awesome. And that is for question one. Thank you so much for that submission. Any other thoughts or comments on that group one? All right, let's go to group two. How will stakeholders ensure that the shared measurement systems reflect the diverse needs and priorities of all communities affected by the food policy? We have Abdul, Carla, Claudia, Maya, and May.
I wrote for how stakeholders ensure that shared measurement is using constant communication, follow-ups, and clear updates, and also by celebrating all types of success, even the small ones.
Awesome, awesome. Anybody want to add to that from group two?
I was just gonna say, making sure you engage with a variety of stakeholders to get opinions from everyone affected.
Indeed, indeed, and also think of both qualitative and quantitative, right? Quantitative is the how much, how many, and where, and the qualitative is like how is it experienced? What is it that community members want to see? And those things can be measured in the future through those feedback loops, right? But that quantitative and qualitative is critical, because the quantitative will tell you where things are happening, what the issues are, right? But once you have awareness of, like, let's say what the issue is and where it's happening, you then want to do your research on that target demographic group that's most impacted by the issue, so you can have a better understanding on the qualitative components related to the matter, right? How people are experiencing this issue, what challenges they face on the day-to-day, and what solutions they've identified as, that would address those challenges, right? And those things can come through desktop research as well as direct engagement through surveys, interviews, and things of that nature. Thank you so much for sharing that, group two. Group three, what processes will be followed for reviewing and updating metrics to ensure they remain relevant as the initiative evolves? What was coming up for shared impact in relation to that? Group number three, we got Chase Gill, Henry Gonzalez, Jamie, Melissa, and Nestor.
I can respond for group three.
Awesome.
Oh.
Go ahead and jump in there, Jamie.
I said that the processes can include like regular evaluation cycles where stakeholders meet to review the data, and they could update for the data to remain relevant. And they could also continuously get feedback from the community and diverse groups to ensure that it reflects like the evolving needs and priorities.
Awesome. That's amazing, Jamie. Thank you for that overview. And then we have Melissa in the chat with what processes will be followed. They are using a local firm data boom for both their data collection and distribution. Furthermore, they're offering a QR code to be able to keep up on the evolving info, right? And so that's also great examples there. Another key component of this, I think, is an example of collective impact where they're partnering with other stakeholders who can support with the work that needs to be done, right? So instead of doing the data collection on their own, they're working with Data Boom, which is a third-party entity, right, that creates economic opportunity. This could be, for example, a Black-owned, women-owned, or veteran-owned business that is within a landscape, who can create, economic opportunity from this initiative, right? And so that's something else to point out in relation to this approach, and I'm glad that you pointed that out, Melissa. Let's go to number 4. How will stakeholders use shared data to inform decision makers, decision making and adjust strategies in real time? Group number 4, we have Isaac, Manuel, Patty, Philip, and Rebecca.
Yeah, so for number 4, we were talking about it, and so we kind of came up with like the use, like the shared data is through really like reports, deliverables, going to meetings, and continually giving feedback about policies, grants, and setbacks. And that's everybody with the backbone facilitating that process. So pretty much all that up-to-date information is going through them so that they have the bigger resources to manage that. And then through continual feedback and conversation, they can adjust the strategies in real time.
Awesome. Those are some really great examples there. And that real-time strategy development and adjustments happen all the time. Anything could take place. Someone, say for example, a new mayor or a new council office, right? You may have to pivot to align to the new vision. Anything could happen. The funders may stop funding the program year to year, right? So you may have to look to other funding resources. Anything could happen. And so ensuring that there's the capacity or the ability through the data sharing to inform decision-making and adjustments in real time is super critical. And then who wants to bring us home with the last one? What steps will be taken to ensure transparency and data sharing and reporting, and how will accountability be maintained across all parties involved? Who's holding the data? Gonna pick on someone that we haven't heard that much from today. Let's go to you, Henry. Let's go to Henry, and then I'm gonna read what Paying put in the chat. This is gonna be the last one, Henry. It's gonna be what steps will be taken to ensure transparency and data sharing and reporting, and how will accountability be maintained across the parties involved?
So a good way to a good steps to take to make sure transparency is in the data is sharing the data with other people so they could check it as well. Have do multiple data runs.
Awesome.
And
go ahead.
Oh no, that's
awesome. That's pretty consistent. And looks like Paying is speaking on the data as well. In the chat, public access to non-sensitive data, clear documentation and archiving of data changes and decisions, independent audits and compliance checks, right? So another thing is like that backbone entity really being the store of most if not all of the data. So if tasks are being completed by third parties, they're ultimately turning it into the backbone entity so that, for example, they can disseminate that information as relevant as needed to the stakeholders and keep whatever sensitive data private as needed as well, right? And so ensuring that whatever sensitive data is on a need-to-know basis, but as soon as it is made public, then the proper channels are receiving that information as soon as possible. So yeah, go ahead. That is the end of today's class. Really appreciate everyone's participation today. I hope you all enjoy working through these two activities in relation to the case study that we reviewed. We will continue this activity in relation to the mutual reinforcement activities and the continuous communication coming up for these next couple of classes. But with that being said, I want to briefly go over the research and reading that you have assigned today. Is chapter 2 of all-inclusive engagement in architecture. I do see that some of you already submitted your responses to chapter 1. Thank you so much for getting those assignments in. I will be reviewing and grading those soon. But we are now on chapter 2. So there are 6 segments to chapter 2. So be sure to start the reading as soon as possible so you can get that reading done and research assignment completed and turned in. Any questions before we end the class for the evening? I hope you all enjoyed the class today. Thumbs up if you had a good time partying in 4782. All right, awesome. Definitely complete your assignments and turn them in as soon as possible. I know there was a little kerfuffle with the availability of last week's lecture. So let's get that turned in. But let's get you all another week to complete that task. But again, there is no late submission deadline, so just turn it in as soon as possible, and we'll go ahead and get you the credit for that. And make sure you respond to the questions for this week's lecture. You'll submit them separately, right? You learn from each other, but each of you will submit those questions separately on the lecture submission. It's been a pleasure for today. If any questions come up, do not hesitate to email and we can talk about it. But I will let you all go for the evening. And I hope you all have a good time until we meet again.
Thank you, Professor.
Very welcome. You're very welcome.